the TPP is interesting in part because it's a mixture of these high-income countries like Australia and New Zealand and the US that have relatively high wages, also mixed in with countries like Vietnam that have very low wages. And so there's much more of a risk with the Trans-Pacific Partnership that the agreement will result in offshoring of jobs, moving jobs from the US to cheaper labor in one of those other countries. So, okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about tariffs, which is sort of the traditional trade thing, okay? And that is an issue in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Tariffs are this additional amount of money that's on, you buy a car, well, let's take shoes. You buy some shoes that were made in Vietnam. A tariff is some money that was put on it, like a tax or a fee, that you pay extra so that it costs more similar to the price of a shoe that was made in Skowhegan, Maine. Shoes in Skowhegan, Maine cost more. Why? Because we've got all kinds of health and safety protections, worker safety, minimum wage, benefits sometimes not, 40-hour week, overtime pay, child labor laws, right to organize. I know a lot of these things are kind of, being decimated, but the fact is overall, compared to some of these countries, this is what is going to make things cost more. And so tariffs are there to even the playing field and to really actually help prevent jobs from going to that other country because there isn't so much financial advantage to selling that product that was made with super cheap labor. And just a little bit, because this is a big issue for Maine about Vietnam, which is one of the parties to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This was from like a year ago, but it hasn't changed since then. As far as I know, there's been no progress on this issue. The U.S. position is to completely get rid of all tariffs on every good that the U.S. buys or sells. No tariffs, complete, nothing there. A lot of the footwear companies, in fact, all of them except for New Balance, manufacture 100% of their shoes not in the United States. So their interest is in getting rid of tariffs because it's going to benefit their sale of those products, which again are not made in the US, they're made by workers in other countries. New Balance actually still has 3 factories in the state of Maine, and I think 2 in Massachusetts, I don't know, and there's 800 and 900 people who work in those factories in Maine. So New Balance's position, and they also make some shoes not in the United States, but they're committed to keeping these plants going, and so their position is we don't want to have tariffs down to 0, and if they go down to 0, we're going to have to close those factories in the state of Maine. So this is an issue that's unresolved. It is one that our members of Congress are very focused on. I would just say this. It's an incredibly important issue. I have had some private discussions with some members of Congress, and my concern is that if, in fact, they win on this point, that they're then, well, okay, now I'll vote for the whole rest of it, which, as I said, is 28 other chapters. So it's really important as you think about educating people about these issues that keep this in mind. It's very important. But if you didn't have the agreement at all, then you wouldn't have to worry about this. So you have to first figure out why you want to have the agreement, what's good about it, as opposed to trading off this issue for a yes vote on the treaty. Just a little bit more about Vietnam. It's actually so cheap now that it's cheaper than China in terms of, so a lot of companies are moving from China to Vietnam because it's even less expensive. And I went to the State Department website just to check out Vietnam, and the State Department, which is part of the discussions around the TPP, on its own website, they're talking about, credible reports that factories exceeded legal overtime thresholds, didn't meet the requirements on the job injuries, just really bad. Child labor exploitation, 25,000 children working in hazardous conditions, and observer believes that's really not the real number. So these things really matter, and we don't want to facilitate worse policies over there. So this is New Balance. When the former trade representative Ron Kirk came, gave a talk, met with the workers, but it's really true. New Balance is in the balance, and if the TPP TPP is approved, with this provision that gets footwear tariffs down to zero or down to zero over a period of time, then these jobs may well be complete history. You can contact your members of Congress and the President, and again, that my proviso on that is, I am concerned that some of our members of Congress would say, have said, look, if they make good on New Balance, then I'm obligated to vote for the agreement. No, you're not. I mean, there's a lot in this agreement. And let's figure out what it's doing that's good. Because the Korea trade agreement that we just entered into over a year ago was supposed to produce all kinds of jobs, and it's actually contributed to a greater trade deficit and the loss of jobs. So it doesn't follow that you have to vote for it. I mean, there needs to be some good reason for it. And I've been presenting all the reasons against it. So they need to make that case.